Good day, everybody. My name is Max Atkins from the Connect for Climate program of the World Bank. We're coming to you live here in Frankfurt from the Innovate for Climate conference, where leaders are gathering to look at innovation and finance, technology, business opportunities, investments, and the policy that will drive that whole transition to a low-carbon resilient future. So we're in a critical time in our history. It's my great pleasure to be joined here by Tim Jarvis. Tim, you're an environmental explorer, an adventurer, a documentary filmmaker, and you have numerous titles under your belt with your amazing achievements. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you. Good to be here.
So you've seen it firsthand. You've been out there, you've been touching nature, you've been crossing the South Pole, for which you actually hold the record for crossing the South Pole with the fastest unassisted time. Is that correct?
To the South Pole, yeah. That's right. Yeah.
Amazing. So you've been out there. You've seen the environmental impacts that we as humans are causing because of global warming. What have you seen? What is your main message? What is your main takeaway from being out in those pristine environments?
Well, climate change is real. It's having a major impact, obviously. It affects everywhere, not just the polar regions, but the polar regions are a place where it's very clearly seen. So up in the Arctic, if you want to go to the North Pole, you've got to travel across sea ice. And by 2037, we won't have any more sea ice in the summer. And that's a big problem. So that's very obvious to see. Down in the Antarctic, you've got the opposite to the Arctic. The Arctic is an ocean surrounded by land. The Antarctic is a continent surrounded by ocean. But you're seeing major melting in the western part of Antarctica too. And there's enough ice in that ice cap to raise sea levels by 70 meters. So we've got every reason to be very concerned.
And it's very much this visual experience of the melting ice that is symbolic of the global warming, right? So we already know that it's around 1.1 degrees of warming above pre-industrial levels.
Yeah.
But what are the other associated impacts that one realizes from the global warming that we're producing from our greenhouse gases?
Well, it's true. I mean, I think the big problem, because you touched on a really important point about climate change, is that you can't see greenhouse gas. And because it's so intangible, people don't regard it as real. And 1 degree Celsius is not deemed to be very significant by many lay people. It does make a big difference because the average temperature of the Earth is only 15 degrees. So 1 degree above 15 is significant. And if we go another 2 degrees, we'll end up 20% warmer than the average temperature that the Earth should be. So that's the way you've got to think of it. There are many impacts on people, from sea level rise, from warming of the ocean, from less nutrients cycling in the ocean because it gets warmer, to the way that coral infrastructure gets affected by warming. 500 million people a day rely on fishing from coral reefs for their daily sustenance, and that's bad news if those coral reefs become affected. Sea level rise, obviously we have a lot of the world's population live in cities, and many of those cities are coastal cities. And then you have things like disease incidents and drought and more extreme weather events. There's many, many ways that it manifests itself.
And also with a warming environment, you get more energy in the atmosphere. But that is very symbolic of the melting glaciers. So maybe you could just tell us a little bit about the documentary project that you brought to COP21 in Paris, and also about your next trip.
Yeah, well, just to talk about the energy that we receive from the sun on the Earth, we receive 1,000 watts for every square meter. So that's a lot of energy. And if we go up by a couple of degrees, we'll end up with 1,200 watts, which is very significant. We end with 2 additional 100-watt light bulbs on every square meter of the planet's surface, including the ocean and the land. My latest project is called 25-0 and involves climbing all the mountains at the equator that have a glacier, and there are 25 of those, and in a quarter of a century the ice will be gone due to climate change. And the reason I've chosen it is because the glaciers are a very easy way to show climate change, and because large numbers of people are being affected by their loss. And so you can tell the human stories, and it's the human stories that really resonate with people. Make climate change more of an emotional issue rather than just parts per million of CO2 in the atmosphere.
Absolutely, and it's really those emotions that we want to pick on, and those human stories that we want to help infuse into this kind of a conference here, right?
Yeah.
So what's your message to the conference goers, who are the innovators around finance, around business, around investments that are driving this big transition to a low-carbon resilient future?
Well, my message to them is that they are central to this. In fact, they are the most important single component. If we don't bankroll the wrong kind of things, then we'll end up with the future that we want. And banks and insurers are absolutely central to that, along with the technology, of course, required to deliver the world that we have. Governments can only ever give us an environment that helps financial institutions and innovators flourish, but at the end of the day, the heavy lifting has to be done by the people who fund things and the technology required to solve these things.
And in a way, this great march to a low-carbon resilient future could almost be comparable to one of your adventures, where, you have to bring everything out of yourself. You have to invest your full body, your mind, and everything to get you to a different kind of a future, to achieve your goal.
That's right. I mean, polar expeditions are about heading towards an endless white horizon and chipping away one step at a time in the knowledge that those steps, when added together, will get you to the goal that you want. And that's the position we find ourselves in with climate change and solutions to it. We mustn't lose heart. We must keep going in the knowledge that the cumulative effort of all of us working together can get us to the end outcome.
Absolutely. And we also have a question in the audience. So if I could ask our student to ask a question to Tim. You've got a microphone. Just hold on a second.
I really love that you talked about having the narratives and bringing out the emotional issue, and I'm wondering how you can transform that, the digital storytelling, into young people actually taking change into their own hands and finding solutions to some of the problems that we're facing now.
I think you've touched on two really important points. One is using stories to really make the issue come alive for people such that they feel compelled to want to do something. That's the first thing. And that just doesn't apply to just people in the digital world. It's of course all of us. And the second thing is, what can people do? Once you get them motivated, the worst thing you can do is get people motivated, get them fired up to want to do something, and then don't tell them what to do. And I'm in the business of trying to work, particularly I work with banks, insurers, technology companies, property developers, airlines, because I see these industries as having essentially large carbon footprints, and they want assistance in trying to decarbonize what they can do, and I'm trying to help them in the process of doing it. If you want to talk offline about the kinds of things that an individual can do, I can give you a list of the top 5 in terms of how you travel to work, where you invest your money, how you approach your locally appointed political representative, and the kinds of messages you should come up with to try and affect change. But I think I've decided the industries that I think are the most important, and I'm trying to work with them to decarbonize them.
Maybe just picking up on that word decarbonization. So having looked at some of your previous conversations, you describe yourself as being pragmatic. So what are the pragmatic climate solutions? How can we accelerate this decarbonization? And what do you see happening in the next couple of years to really help achieve that accelerated climate action that is needed for us to transition to a low-carbon future?
Big questions, but I think that someone like me who enjoys spending time in the outdoors and loves the natural environment would love to spend time outdoors swimming with whale sharks and walking around in the polar regions and celebrating the beauty of nature. But the reality is 75% of us by 2050 will live in cities, and if we don't stop the mass consumption, look at ways in which people get their energy, the amount of waste we produce, then we may as well pack up our bags and go home. We really need to be engaging with people who are in a position to do something about the problem, and that's what I try and do. In Australia, for example, where I live, 39% of our carbon footprint comes from heating, lighting and cooling buildings. Very evidently, you have to work with the property sector. Not every environmentalist would want to work with the property sector, frankly, but I enjoy working with them because I can see there's a lot of quick wins and low-hanging fruit that we can get to realise quick carbon savings just through making some really simple changes to lighting and heating and cooling.
So it can very much be done. We just have to all work together and take those steps one by one. So maybe in closing, what is your comparison, or what is your takeaway from marching to the South Pole? What went through your head as you're doing such amazing and ambitious physical achievements, And how can you take that message to what we need to do now?
I think when you're leading a team of people to do a polar expedition, you're really mindful of the fact that everybody's different. And if you want to get them to pull as one to achieve a singular goal, in my case, reaching the South Pole or whatever it is with a team of people, you have to be aware that you approach each one of them with a slightly different message to get them to want to pull as one as part of a singular effort. And I think that's what we need to do in the climate space. We've got to accept that not everybody is motivated by guilt and fear. Some people are motivated by that. Some people are motivated by financial opportunity. Some are motivated by other things. And it's important for us to understand what the message is that will resonate with the audience whose behavior it is we're trying to change. And I happen to feel the environment movement has perhaps over the years tended to favour guilt and fear as the two means by which they'll motivate changes in behaviour amongst people. And there's plenty of other shades of grey that we need to be using, and not just those. Shades of green, I should say.
And those shades of green are also opportunity and optimism. And that's also very much what this conference here is about.
That's right. And I mean, we really have reached a tipping point with renewable energy, for example. In South Australia, where I live, the gas-fired power plant that we had locally, the two coal-fired ones had been shut down in favour of solar and pumped hydro. And the gas-fired power plant asked for a subsidy from the local government, saying we need a subsidy in order to compete with solar because we can't compete. How about it? And the government said, sorry, we don't see you as part of our future energy landscape. You're out of luck because solar is too cheap. So we often hear from people from the other side of the spectrum that renewables don't work or they can't compete against fossil fuel alternatives. Well, the answer is that's not the reality of the situation. The reality is, in fact, completely the opposite, and that's good news.
Thank you so very much, Tim. And so you've heard it from Tim Jarvis. We are transitioning to a low-carbon future. There are amazing examples of opportunity and where action is taking place, but there's still a lot more to do. The environment that we are experiencing is showing climate change signs, and you've seen it firsthand in the Arctic regions. Thank you so very much, Tim.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
Thanks.